At my sister's engagement, Dad said loud enough, "Proud of the child who actually made something." I raised my glass. Tomorrow, the town will know who paid for this party. Can you imagine pouring your heart, soul, and every single dollar into building a life, only to have your own family treat you like a personal ATM? For years, they dismissed me, mocked me, and then, in one shocking, infuriating moment, they stole from me. But what they didn't realize was that betrayal wasn't going to break me. It was the spark I needed to blow their entire facade wide open. See, I'm Oliver, and if you'd told me just 5 years ago that I'd be sitting at a fancy engagement dinner for my sister, Claire, surrounded by my family, I would have laughed in your face. I'd have said there was no way in hell I'd be anywhere near them. Yet there I was, jaw clenched so tight it ached, trying to look utterly unbothered, while my aunt actually snorted into her wine glass. And my mom? She gave me that quiet, oh-so-satisfied smile she'd been perfecting since I was a teenager. It was a look that just screamed, "I told you so." Growing up, I was always the comparison. Not the golden child, that was Claire, with her perfect grades, endless awards, and never missing a deadline. No, I was the cautionary tale. The kid who loved to build things, take them apart, and dream up business ideas that just never made sense to my parents. They'd always say Claire was steady, and I was reckless. It was their favorite dinner table conversation, you know? How I'd never amount to anything if I didn't just settle down and pick something realistic. Can you imagine being told that over and over while you're just trying to figure out who you are? I moved out the second I legally could. I scraped by, working 2 jobs and running a tiny side hustle, repairing bikes in my apartment, just to keep the lights on. My family barely visited. And when they did, it was usually just to drop another bomb about Claire's latest scholarship or internship. I tried to tell myself I didn't care. But some nights, after another brutal 14-hour day, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder if they were right about me. Was I just a disappointment? Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started to turn. A few good clients here, a lucky break with an investor there, and suddenly my little repair and resale gig wasn't just a side hustle, it was a full-fledged business. The first year I could pay my rent on time without panicking? That felt like absolute freedom. By year 3, I had employees. By year 5, I had 2 locations, a steady, solid income, and more in savings than my parents could ever even imagine. And still, I kept it all quiet. Partly out of habit, yeah, but a bigger part of me, a stubborn, wounded part, wanted to see how long it would take them to actually notice on their own. To see me for who I'd become, not who they thought I was. Then Claire got engaged. My parents called, their voices dripping with saccharine sweetness, asking if I'd like to contribute. Let's be real, it wasn't a question. They talked about the expensive engagement dinner, how much it meant to Claire, and how it would be a good chance to show support. I just wired the money. More money than I had ever given them for anything. And I never even got a simple thank you. Not a single one. So there I was, sitting at the very table I'd technically paid for, watching Claire beam at her fiancé. And then my dad, he leaned back in his chair, loosened his tie, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "We're so proud of the child who actually made something of herself." The words hit me like a physical slap across the face. My aunt's laugh cut through the air like a knife. My mom gave me that familiar, quiet, satisfied smile. Every single head at that table turned toward me, waiting to see how I'd react. Waiting for me to shrink, to look away, to make myself small, like I always did. But something in me just snapped. Instead, I raised my glass. I held their gaze. And I smiled. "Funny you say that," I said, my voice dangerously, even unnervingly calm. "Because tomorrow morning, the entire town will know exactly who's been paying for this party all along." The room went absolutely silent. Claire's fork froze midair. My dad's face turned just slightly red, and my mom blinked as though she hadn't heard me right. The air suddenly felt heavier, charged with unspoken words. I could see the questions flickering in their eyes, the confusion, the unease. I didn't say anything else. I just took a slow sip of my drink and let that tension settle. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't the one feeling small. They were. And trust me, that was just the beginning. The silence at that dinner table didn't last long, of course. It never did with my family. My dad cleared his throat loudly, that distinct sound that meant he was about to try and retake control of the room. "Oliver," he said with a practiced chuckle, always joking. "Can't you just enjoy a nice evening for once?" His tone was light, but there was a sharp edge underneath it, like he was daring me to push the point any further. I smiled politely, nodded, and let the moment pass, at least on the surface. Inside, my pulse was hammering. Years of training myself to stay quiet around them had made this reaction automatic. Let the joke land, swallow the anger, wait for the conversation to move on. And it did. Claire jumped in with a story about her fiancé's proposal. My aunt made a big deal about the ring. Soon, the room was buzzing with chatter again. But I couldn't ignore how my parents kept sneaking glances at me, like they were trying to decide if I'd finally lost my mind. And I couldn't shake the way Claire kept giving me that sweet, slightly condescending smile, the one she always used when she thought she had one. After dinner, as everyone milled around in the lounge area, I caught snippets of conversations clearly meant for me to overhear. "Always been a bit dramatic," my aunt whispered to my mom near the bar. "Probably just jealous," my uncle said, not even bothering to lower his voice. And then Claire, laughing softly to one of her bridesmaids, "I think he's just bitter. It must be hard, seeing everyone so happy when you haven't really figured your life out." That one stung more than I wanted to admit. Figure my life out? I'd been figuring my life out while she was still borrowing money from my parents in college. But I didn't say anything. I didn't even flinch. I just sat back on the leather sofa, swirling my drink, and let them think I hadn't heard. When it was finally time to leave, my dad clapped me on the shoulder a little too hard. "Next time, Oliver," he said, "just bring a date, smile, and enjoy the food. All right? You don't have to make everything about you." I just nodded once and walked out without replying. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Don't take your father's comments so seriously. Tonight was about your sister, not you." I stared at that message for a long time before putting the phone face down on the passenger seat. It was so typical, dismissing what he'd said as if I'd imagined it, reframing it as my problem. And it worked, at least in the past. But not tonight. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls. From Claire. No voicemail, just missed calls. I ignored them and went about my day, heading to one of my shops to check inventory and talk with the manager about an upcoming expansion. It was a good morning. Sales had been up for months, and we were finally in a position to hire more staff. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text, "Family dinner Sunday at Mom and Dad's. Be there." No question mark. "No, if you can make it. Just an order." I almost didn't go, but some stubborn part of me wanted to see what they would try next. Sunday dinner at my parents' house was exactly what I expected. Claire sitting in her usual spot, glowing and talking about wedding venues, my mom fussing over her, and my dad making little digs at me under the guise of jokes. "Maybe you can help with the repairs at the new house, Oliver," my dad said at one point. "You're good with tools, right? At least you can be useful that way." Claire giggled. "Oh my gosh, that's actually a good idea. Free labor." I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it was so utterly predictable. "Sure," I said, "if you can afford my hourly rate." They all paused for a moment before bursting out laughing like I had made the best joke of the night. My mom even wiped a tear from her eye. "Hourly rate," she repeated, still chuckling. "Oh, Oliver, you really do think you're a big shot." I let them have their laugh. Later that evening, when dessert was served, my mom made an announcement. "We've decided," she said sweetly, "that we're going to put the engagement party photos in the town paper. Claire deserves to be celebrated, and we want everyone to know how proud we are." I sipped my coffee slowly. "That's nice," I said. And my dad added, "We'll need a little help covering the cost of the announcement. It's a bit expensive, but we know you'll be happy to contribute." Right there. Not even pretending to ask this time. I set my cup down carefully and looked around the table. Everyone was watching me, waiting for me to say yes, like I always did, waiting for me to just hand over more money and stay quiet. "Sure," I said finally, smiling. But this time, I want to handle the design myself. I know a guy at the paper. My mom's face lit up. Oh, that's wonderful. Claire clapped her hands. You see, she said, he's not always so difficult. I just smiled and nodded. But inside, I felt something shift. This wasn't going to be just another check I wrote and forgot about. This time, I was going to make sure they couldn't ignore what I'd done or who I'd become. As I left their house that night, my dad called after me. Don't make it too flashy, Oliver. This is about Claire, not about you. I waved over my shoulder, not bothering to answer. My mind was already working through the details. Because if they wanted the whole town to see how proud they were of Claire, then they were also going to see exactly who made it possible. And that was when I started to plan. The week after that dinner, I buried myself in work. It wasn't hard. My shops were busy. I had meetings lined up with suppliers, and there was an upcoming deal that could double my revenue within the next quarter. Still, in the quiet moments, I caught myself replaying that night at my parents' house in my head. The laughter, the casual dismissal, my dad's hand wave like I was just background noise. I thought I'd be numb to it by now, but the truth was, it still got under my skin. I kept telling myself that I was just going to follow through on my agreement, pay for the newspaper announcement, design it, and make sure my name appeared somewhere in fine print, so at least my contribution was public. Nothing dramatic, nothing over the top. But somewhere deep down, I think I knew that wasn't going to be enough. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon. I had just finished loading some inventory in the back of my truck when my phone rang. It was my mom, Oliver, she said without so much as a hello. We need to talk about the venue deposit. I frowned, wiping sweat from my forehead. What venue deposit? For the wedding, she said, as though it was obvious. They needed a larger deposit to hold the date. We went ahead and paid it. Well, technically, we used your transfer from last month. There wasn't quite enough for the caterer and the photographer after the engagement dinner, so we had to shift things around. I froze. You used the money I sent for the engagement dinner? Oliver, she said patiently, like she was talking to a child, it all goes to the same place. You want your sister to have a beautiful wedding, don't you? I stood there in the sun, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. That wasn't your decision to make, I said finally, my voice strained. My mom sighed. Don't be so dramatic. You make good money now. It's not like you can't afford it. There it was. Not a thank you, not even an apology, just the blatant assumption that my money was theirs to use however they saw fit. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just hung up. I sat in the cab of my truck for a long time, staring out at the parking lot. I could feel my heart thumping against my ribs, the betrayal settling in like a stone in my stomach. They hadn't just taken my money, they had decided, without even asking, that it was their right to do so. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my laptop, pulling up bank statements, receipts, everything. The more I looked, the angrier I got. Over the past year alone, I had paid for the engagement dinner, helped cover Claire's car repair, chipped in for 4 emergency home repairs at my parents' house, and sent them money for a trip they took to visit my aunt. And, through all of it, they had acted like it was no more than my duty. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house unannounced. My dad answered the door, looking mildly surprised. Oliver, to what do we owe the pleasure? We need to talk, I said flatly. In the living room, I told them exactly what I thought. About the deposit, about the way they'd used my money without asking, about the way they'd treated me for years like I was somehow less than Claire. My mom folded her arms. Oliver, you're overreacting. You've always been so sensitive. My dad shook his head, smirking slightly. You're acting like we stole from you. You're part of this family. Families share. Do they? I asked quietly. Because I don't remember anyone offering to help me when I was working 70 hours a week just to keep my apartment. My dad's expression hardened. You made your choices. We helped you plenty when you were younger. Don't act like you've done us some huge favor. You should be grateful you're in a position to contribute now. I just stared at him. Grateful. That was the word he used. Like I should be thanking them for letting me foot the bill for their lives. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I'm done, I said finally, my voice calm but cold. Don't ask me for another dime. And don't touch any money I send without my permission again. Ever. My mom opened her mouth to protest, but I stood up and walked out before she could speak. Driving home, I felt strangely clear-headed. The anger was still there, burning hot in my chest, but underneath it was something else. Resolve. I wasn't just going to pull back quietly. Not this time. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Claire. "Oliver," she said as soon as I picked up, "what is wrong with you? Mom says you stormed out. You know the wedding is stressful enough without you making everything about yourself." "Claire," I said, keeping my tone even. "You and Mom used money I sent for something else without even telling me. That's not okay." She laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "You're seriously mad about that? You have more money than you know what to do with. This is my wedding, Oliver, my once-in-a-lifetime day. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't be making this difficult." Her words hit harder than I wanted them to. There it was again. That assumption that my role was to give and give until they were satisfied, no matter what it cost me. When I didn't answer right away, she pressed on. "Look, if you're going to act like this, maybe it's better if you just sit out some of the events. We don't need the drama." "Maybe you're right," I said quietly. I hung up before she could reply. For the next 2 days, I ignored their calls. I buried myself in work again, but my mind kept returning to that conversation, to my dad's smirk, to Claire's laughter. By Saturday night, I knew exactly what I was going to do. If they wanted the whole town to see how proud they were, then fine. I was going to give them something to be proud of, something they couldn't laugh off, something they couldn't dismiss or twist into another joke at my expense. And this time, I wasn't going to warn them. I didn't go to my parents' house that Sunday. For the first time in years, I let the group chat blow up with, "Where are you?" messages and didn't respond. At first, there was confusion. A few texts from Claire saying things like, "I hope you're just running late." Then there were the passive-aggressive follow-ups from my mom. "We saved you a plate. We'd appreciate you not making a scene." I didn't reply to those either. Instead, I sat in my apartment in the dark, my phone face down on the counter, eating cold leftovers straight from the container. There was something strangely freeing about the silence. No constant commentary about my life. No backhanded jokes disguised as concern. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the steady rhythmic thoughts circling in my head. But if I'm being honest, it hurt. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I'd been angry plenty of times before, annoyed, frustrated, even humiliated. But this was different. It felt final, like some invisible line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Monday morning, I woke up with that heavy feeling in my chest that usually meant I was about to get sick. Except I knew it wasn't a cold. It was the weight of everything that had happened over the past 2 weeks sitting squarely on me. At work, I was distracted. My manager asked me if something was wrong, and I brushed it off, but I could tell she didn't believe me. Even my employees, who usually came to me with questions all day, seemed hesitant, like they could sense I wasn't in the mood. By the time I got home that night, there were 8 missed calls from my mom and 3 from Claire. I scrolled through them, read the string of texts that had gone from polite to irritated to downright guilt-trippy. "Oliver, you're ruining this for your sister. This is supposed to be the happiest time of her life. Do you really want her to remember you as the brother who couldn't put his pride aside for one weekend?" Each message hit like a tiny hammer, but not for the reason they probably thought. It wasn't guilt I felt. Not anymore. It was clarity. They would never see me as anything but the difficult one, the problem to be managed, the disappointment. No matter how much I did for them, no matter how much money I sent, no matter how much I bit my tongue, it would never be enough. And that was when something inside me shifted. I started staying later at my shops. If I wasn't there, I was at home crunching numbers, reviewing financial projections, and quietly transferring funds into an account they didn't know existed. I called my accountant and told him I wanted to tighten up my books, make sure every transaction was accounted for, every expense clear. "What's the reason?" he asked curiously. I thought about it for a moment before answering. "Because I'm done letting anyone treat me like a walking wallet." He didn't press for more, but I could tell from his pause that he understood more than I said. The next weekend, I skipped another family dinner. This time, I got a call from my dad. Not a text, not a message relayed through Claire. What are you doing? He demanded as soon as I answered. You can't just disappear every time you're in a mood. We have things to discuss. No, Dad, I said evenly. You have things to demand. There's a difference. Don't start, he warned. This family has always supported you. I actually laughed. Supported me? You mean when you told me I was wasting my life because I wouldn't go into accounting like you? Or when you refused to co-sign for my first apartment because you didn't think I'd stick with it? That kind of support. He was silent for a moment. We're trying to give your sister the wedding she deserves. Why are you making this harder than it has to be? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even sound angry. Because you took my money without asking, I said quietly. Because you made decisions for me and expected me to thank you for it, and because I'm not going to let you do it again. Before he could reply, I hung up. I turned off my phone and left it off for the rest of the weekend. And for the first time in years, I slept better than I ever had. Over the next few weeks, I began to pull back even more. I stopped checking the family group chat entirely. I stopped answering calls. The only person I occasionally replied to was my cousin, who'd always been a little more understanding than the rest of them. You okay? He texted one night. Yeah, I wrote back. Just done playing their game. He sent back a thumbs up emoji and didn't press, which I appreciated. At work, I threw myself into a new project, something I'd been planning for months, but never had the time to really commit to. I signed the lease on a third location, a space I'd been eyeing for a while, but hesitated to commit to because I wasn't sure if it was the right time. Now, it felt perfect. If my family was going to define me as the black sheep, I might as well lean into it, not as the failure they thought I was, but as the man who built something without them. At night, I found myself lying awake, thinking through scenarios. Not just ways to get back at them, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it, but ways to reclaim the narrative. If they wanted to paint me as selfish, fine. I could live with that. But they weren't going to keep using my success as a secret, only acknowledged when it benefited them. No more quiet checks. No more just this once transfers. The next time I gave anything to that family, the entire town was going to know exactly who had done it. And I wasn't just talking about a newspaper announcement anymore. The shift was subtle at first, not some overnight movie moment where everything magically changed, but I could feel it. The weight that had been pressing down on me for years was lifting little by little, and in its place was something sharper, steadier, focus. I poured every ounce of my energy into my business. If I wasn't at one of the shops, I was on the phone with suppliers, building new partnerships, running numbers with my accountant, or staying up late refining plans for the third location. This time, I wasn't just trying to keep my head above water. I was building something big enough that no one, not even my family, could pretend it didn't exist. And it started to pay off fast. Within 2 months, the third shop was up and running, and it was outperforming the original two combined. People in town were starting to notice. Customers would stop me on the street to tell me they loved what I was doing. Local blogs wrote features about the young entrepreneur revitalizing old spaces. My employees were happier too. With the extra revenue, I was able to give raises and hire more staff, which meant everyone could breathe a little easier. For the first time, I could look in the mirror and feel proud of what I saw. Not just someone surviving, but someone thriving. Of course, word eventually reached my family. It always did. It started with my cousin texting me, "Your mom brought you up at dinner last night. Said she heard, you're doing well." Said it like she was shocked. Then came the calls. First, my mom, leaving a voicemail that said, "We're happy for you, Oliver. Maybe now you can relax and enjoy being part of the family again." I didn't call back. Claire tried next. "I heard you opened another store," she said brightly when I finally answered after 3 missed calls. "That's amazing. Listen, since things are going so well for you, we were wondering if you'd like to help out with the honeymoon fund." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so utterly predictable. "No, Claire," I said calmly. There was a pause. "No," she repeated like the word didn't make sense coming from me. "No," I said again, more firmly. "I'm not contributing another cent to this wedding. Not for the photographer, not for the honeymoon, not for anything. You made it clear you didn't want my drama involved. So, consider this my gift, my complete absence from your budget." She was quiet for a beat, then said stiffly, "Fine, but don't be surprised if people notice you're not helping. It's going to look bad." "Good," I said, and hung up. After that, I stopped taking any of their calls. If they wanted to talk, they could leave a message. Instead of spending weekends at family dinners, I started hosting my own gatherings. Employees, friends, even a few loyal customers would come by to celebrate new milestones. We'd sit around with good food, good music, and I'd look around the room and realize this was what family was supposed to feel like. The turning point came the day the town's business association asked me to speak at their annual luncheon. Me, the kid my parents used to call directionless. I almost said no, but then I realized how symbolic it was. I stood in front of that room full of business owners, investors, and city officials talking about resilience, about taking risks, about betting on yourself when no one else will. When I finished, the applause was loud enough to make my ears ring. Afterward, the mayor shook my hand and thanked me for setting an example. 2 days later, my picture was on the front page of the town paper with the headline, "Local entrepreneur expands to third location, brings dozens of jobs to the area." And that's when the messages from my parents started to sound different. My mom texted, "We're proud of you." "We really are." My dad called and left a voicemail, his tone unusually soft. "You should stop by sometime. We'd like to hear more about what you've been doing." But I didn't stop by because I knew what was coming. Sure enough, a week later, I got an email from my mom with the subject line, "Important, wedding update." She wrote that there had been some budget complications, and they were hoping I might reconsider helping. I stared at the email for a long time before closing it. I wasn't angry, not like before. If anything, I felt calm because this time I was holding all the cards. That weekend, I took a drive out to one of the local newspaper offices. I'd already been in touch with them. I designed the layout for the engagement announcement weeks ago, but now I made some changes. I sat with the editor and laid out exactly what I wanted. Not just a photo of Claire and her fiancé with a little blurb underneath, but a full-page spread, photos of the engagement dinner, the decorations, the venue, and a short piece about how the event had been made possible by a generous anonymous donor who wished to celebrate family in style. Except this time, it wasn't going to be anonymous. When I left the office, the sun was setting, the air warm against my face. I sat in my truck for a while, looking out over the town I had grown up in, the town that had seen me as the kid who would never amount to much. They were about to see me differently, and so was my family. I didn't tell anyone what I had done. I just went home, cooked myself dinner, and waited because I knew the morning that paper hit doorsteps, everything was going to change. The week leading up to the newspaper announcement felt almost cinematic, like the slow tightening of a bowstring before it's loosed. Every day I woke up with that same electric energy buzzing under my skin. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore. It was about reclaiming every little piece of myself they'd chipped away over the years. But even as I set my plan in motion, life seemed determined to give me more ammunition. 3 days before the paper was scheduled to run, I stopped by one of my shops to drop off some supplies. My manager, Lisa, waved me into the back office. "You're going to want to see this," she said, her tone unreadable. On the desk was a folded-up flyer. At first, I thought it was just another wedding vendor promotion. But when I opened it, my jaw tightened. It was an invitation, not to the wedding itself, but to a bridal shower fundraiser. And whose name was listed under sponsor? Mine. Except, of course, I hadn't sponsored anything. "They dropped off a stack of these this morning," Lisa said carefully. "Your parents came by. They said you'd agreed to cover the cost of the shower venue and catering. I told them I didn't think that was right, but they left these for you to hand out here." I stared at the flyer. It had a photo of Claire smiling with her fiancé, a list of wish list items guests could contribute to, and in bold lettering, "Thanks to the generosity of Oliver, the shower will be one to remember." My first reaction was disbelief. Then it turned into a sharp, bitter laugh. Of course, they had gone behind my back. Of course, they had decided I would pay for another event without even asking me. Lisa hesitated, then said softly, "Do you want me to throw them out?" I shook my head slowly. "No, actually, keep them and make sure every single one gets handed out." Her brows lifted slightly, but she didn't question me. When I got back to my truck, I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, feeling that same heavy knot in my chest. Except this time, instead of letting it crush me, I let it sharpen me. If I'd had any hesitation before, it was gone now. That night, I called the newspaper editor again. "Is it too late to make one more change?" I asked. He chuckled, cutting it close. "Oliver, what did you have in mind?" I told him. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "That's going to make a statement." "Exactly," I said. The next morning, I went to the bank and made a transfer. Not to my parents, not to Claire, but to a local charity in Claire's name, the exact amount they had claimed I sponsored for the shower. I made sure the receipt was sent to me directly. Then I made a second transfer, a much larger one, to the same charity, this time in my own name, enough to fund a new program they've been trying to get off the ground for years. When the director called me personally to thank me, I said, "You're welcome, but I do have one request. When you make the announcement about the donation, can you make sure it goes out the same day as the paper?" She agreed immediately. By Thursday evening, everything was lined up perfectly. The newspaper spread was finalized. The charity announcement was scheduled. The flyers with my name on them were circulating all over town, which meant my parents probably thought they'd pulled one over on me. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my cousin, not my friends, not my employees. But I did make one last stop. Friday afternoon, I drove to my parents' house. When my dad opened the door, he looked surprised to see me. "Oliver," he said cautiously. "Didn't expect you." I smiled. I wanted to drop something off. In the living room, with both of them sitting on the couch, I handed my mom an envelope. Inside was a check. Not for the wedding, not for the shower, but for the exact amount of money they had taken from me for the venue deposit. "Consider this the last time I'm paying for anything related to this wedding," I said calmly. "From here on out, you won't have to worry about me being a problem. You won't have to worry about me at all." My mom's brows furrowed. "Oliver, we didn't mean." "You did," I said gently, cutting her off. "And that's okay. I finally understand how things work in this family. You get what you want, and I get to be the bad guy if I say no. So, I'm done saying yes." My dad's jaw tightened. "You don't have to be dramatic about it." I smiled faintly. "You'll see soon enough that I'm not." I left before they could respond, letting the envelope sit on the coffee table like a quiet little bomb. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Saturday night, I treated myself to a quiet dinner at my favorite restaurant. I sat by the window, sipping wine, and watched people passing by on the street. The town felt different now, smaller somehow, but in a good way. Like I was finally seeing it for what it really was, not just the backdrop for all my childhood failures. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing with group chat notifications. Claire had posted photos of her bridal shower setup, tagging me in the caption, "Thanks to my amazing brother for making this possible." I actually laughed out loud because tomorrow morning, when the paper hit every doorstep in town, everyone would know the truth. Not just about the shower, but about every single thing I'd quietly done for them over the past year. And it wouldn't just be my name in the fine print this time. It would be front and center. Sunday morning started quietly, almost too quietly. I woke up early, not because of an alarm, but because my brain was already humming with anticipation. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the steam curl up from the mug as the sun came through the blinds. Then, at 7:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. The first message came from my cousin. "Dude, go look at the paper right now." I smiled to myself, grabbed my keys, and drove down to the corner store. The clerk handed me a copy with a knowing grin. "Guess we're all talking about you today," he said, tapping the front page. There it was. The full-page spread was even more striking than I imagined. A wide shot of the engagement dinner table perfectly lit with Claire and her fiancé front and center. Underneath the headline, "A Night to Remember, How the Smith Family Celebrated Love and Community," was a smaller caption that read, "This celebration was made possible by the generosity of local business owner Oliver Smith, whose contributions to both family and community continued to grow." Below that, the article detailed not just the engagement dinner, but also every major expense I had quietly covered: the catering, the decor, the custom invitations. And then came the part that made me actually laugh out loud. In addition to funding the event, Mr. Smith recently donated to the town's community development fund and sponsored several upcoming initiatives, including the local youth apprenticeship program. They had taken my words to heart and made sure my name wasn't just mentioned. It was everywhere. I grabbed 3 extra copies and drove back home, grinning the entire way. By the time I got there, my phone was buzzing nonstop. The family group chat was blowing up. "Mom, Oliver, why would you do this? Dad, this wasn't your place. You made us look like we can't provide for our own daughter. Claire, are you kidding me? Why would you put your name all over my engagement? This was supposed to be about me, not you." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I scrolled through social media. Sure enough, the town Facebook group was filled with posts from neighbors congratulating me. "What an amazing thing for Oliver to do for his family," one post read. "It's so good to see young people giving back," another said. My favorite comment was from an older woman I barely knew. "It's wonderful to see the black sheep turn out to be the shepherd." I nearly choked on my coffee laughing at that one. By late morning, the charity director had posted their announcement, too, thanking me by name for funding their new program. Local parents were sharing the post, tagging me, saying how much it would mean for their kids. The narrative was out of my family's hands now, and that was the point. Around noon, I finally answered the group chat. "Me, you wanted the whole town to celebrate Claire. I just made sure they knew who made it possible." "You're welcome." My dad called me within seconds, his voice tight with rage. "You embarrassed us," he said flatly. "No," I said, my tone calm. "I told the truth. The only reason you feel embarrassed is because you wanted everyone to believe you paid for it. But you didn't." "I did." "You could have kept it private," he spat. "You could have asked me before spending my money," I countered. There was a long pause. I could practically hear him grinding his teeth on the other end. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Yes," I said softly. "It is." And I hung up. I spent the rest of the afternoon walking through town, running errands like it was any other Sunday. Everywhere I went, people stopped me to say something kind. A nod. A handshake, a "Hey, I saw the paper this morning." By the time I got back home, I could see the shift happening online, too. Claire had posted an Instagram story about the article captioned, "Not exactly how I wanted the day to be remembered." But the replies were full of people saying things like, "Your brother is incredible and you're lucky to have family like that." I didn't rub it in. Not yet. I didn't need to. The beauty of it was that my revenge wasn't loud or messy. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't thrown accusations. I had simply told the truth publicly, clearly, and in a way that made them face something they had been avoiding for years, that I wasn't the failure they'd made me out to be. That night, I took the last copy of the paper I had bought, framed it, and hung it on my living room wall. Every time I walked past it, I smiled because I knew this was just the beginning. The fallout hadn't even started yet. Monday morning came with another wave of calls and texts, but this time, they weren't just from my family. They were from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old classmates, neighbors, even my old high school shop teacher reached out to congratulate me. "I always knew you'd do something big," he said in his voicemail. And I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. But while the town seemed to be celebrating, my family was unraveling. By noon, my cousin sent me a screenshot from a Facebook thread where my aunt had commented, "We never asked Oliver to do any of this. He just wanted attention." Someone replied almost immediately, "Even if that's true, aren't you grateful?" Most families would be thrilled to have someone help like that. Dozens of likes followed that reply, and my aunt's comment disappeared shortly after. At 3 p.m., Claire finally called me again. Not a text this time, a full call. I debated ignoring it, but something told me it was time to hear what she had to say. "Ollie," she said, her voice tight, but not quite angry. More wounded. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this has been for me? Everyone keeps coming up to me saying how lucky I am to have you as a brother. I'm supposed to be the one people are talking about right now. It's my engagement." "It is," I said calmly. "But it was my money." She was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "You didn't have to make it about you." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Claire, it's always been about you. Every holiday, every dinner, every family gathering. I was just the supporting character in the story of your life. And when I finally did something that mattered, you all still tried to erase me from it. This wasn't about stealing your spotlight. It was about finally standing in my own. Her breath hitched, and for a second, I thought she might cry, but then her tone hardened. You could have just told us how you felt. I did, I said softly. You just never listened. She didn't respond after that. Just hung up. By Tuesday, the fallout had fully set in. My parents' friends were talking, and not in the way my parents had hoped. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering near the produce section. Can you believe they let Oliver pay for everything? One of them said. They always acted like they had so much money, the other replied. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? When my mom heard that gossip was spreading, she called me again, this time sounding almost panicked. You need to fix this, she said without preamble. People are starting to think we can't handle our own affairs. That's not my problem, I said evenly. It is if you care about this family's reputation. I actually laughed at that. Funny, you never cared about mine. Her voice sharpened. This isn't a joke, Oliver. No, I agreed. It's not. It's my life. And for the first time, I'm not letting you write the script. She was quiet for a long moment. Your father doesn't even want to go to the country club dinner next month. He says people are looking at us differently. Maybe that's a good thing, I said. Maybe now they see you the way I've always seen you. Before she could respond, I ended the call. The following weekend, I hosted a small dinner party at my house for my employees to celebrate the new shop's success. Toward the end of the night, there was a knock at my door. It was my dad. He looked tired, not angry, just smaller somehow. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. For a long moment, we just stood there. Finally, he said, you made your point. I crossed my arms. Which point was that? That you're not the failure we thought you were. I didn't say anything, just waited. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I may not like how you handled it, but I can't deny you've done well for yourself. More than we gave you credit for. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was as close as I was ever going to get from him. And I could see that clearly now. Good, I said quietly. Because I'm not doing this dance anymore. If you want me in your life, it has to be on equal footing. No more backhanded comments. No more decisions made for me. No more pretending I don't exist until you need a check. He nodded slowly. I can live with that. When he left, I went back inside, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat with my guests who were laughing and telling stories around the table. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. The next morning, I drove into town early, stopping by the diner where my parents usually had breakfast after church. Sure enough, they were there, sitting in their usual booth. When they saw me walk in, their expressions were unreadable. I walked up to their table, set down the last framed copy of the newspaper spread, and said simply, just so you don't forget who made this happen. Then I turned and walked out, leaving them staring at the frame, at the photo of Claire's smiling face with my name printed boldly beneath it. As I stepped outside into the morning sun, I realized something important. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about drawing a line, one they could never pretend didn't exist. And for the first time, that line was exactly where I wanted it. I climbed into my truck, rolled the window down, and let the breeze hit my face as I drove away, smiling to myself. Because no matter what they told themselves later, no matter how they tried to spin it, the entire town already knew the truth. And this time, there was no going back. What a journey, right? I want to know what you think. If you were in my shoes, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your perspectives on this. And if you've ever had to draw a hard line with your own family, I'd love to hear your story too. Thanks for listening.